Sort of overshadowed by the Fed yesterday, we've got some economic data this morning as well. Jobless claims, of course, weekly jobless claims coming in once again above 400,000, 412,000. The previous week it was 375,000. And this was an unexpected gain, by the way, above 400,000. This is, however, what economists like to refer to as a noisy number. So to help us make sense of it and the trajectory of the jobless market and the job market generally, Heather Boushey is with us now. She's a member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Heather, it's nice to see you again. So how do we sort of cut through the noise? Because it feels though lately, not only are the jobless claims noisy, and that tends to be a sort of more confusing number to parse, but even the monthly numbers seem to be a little bit harder to decipher. So what is your read on what we have been seeing?
Well, Julie, so first of all, this is weekly data based on applications for unemployment benefits in states all across the country and how many people are on their programs. And it does tend to be noisy. Weekly data tends to be. And it's, this is data from an administrative system. So as economists, we tend to look at the 4-week moving average, and that is definitely continues to move in the right direction. So it's been going down for quite a few months now. And so that is good news. So we're moving in the right direction. And we don't want to make too much about any 1 week trend. But this is also consistent with the larger economic story that is emerging from the data. We've seen over 500,000 jobs created each month for the past 4 months. That is a much higher pace than the 60,000 a month that we've been seeing at the end of 2020. So certainly the job market is moving towards recovery. And let us not forget, this recovery is unlike any other, because we are turning the economy back on after an historic pandemic. So, we turned the economy off really quickly back in the spring of 2020, and now we're working to get everybody back to work, reconnected to their jobs, get those businesses back up and running at the way that they were pre-pandemic or better.
Heather, I'm sure you saw what the Federal Reserve announced yesterday and discussed. Do you think higher interest rates from the Federal Reserve would choke off the economic recovery from the pandemic?
Well, what I heard from the Federal Reserve meeting yesterday is that they have significantly upgraded their growth estimates for the United States for this year, up to 7%. That's a number that we haven't seen in quite a long time, which is exactly what you want to see when you're recovering from a pandemic. We turned everything off and we got to ramp up and turn everything back on again. And that's, thanks to the efforts over the past year to make sure that we kept the economy humming along while people were, coping with the pandemic and socially distancing and staying at home. And thanks to the American Rescue Plan that we put in place at the beginning of this calendar year, early this calendar year. I'll also note that the Fed noted that they expect the unemployment rate to be down to about 4.5% by the end of the year. That is a remarkable accomplishment coming out of this pandemic with these, sharp upticks in unemployment, getting everyone back to work. So there's a fine line at some point between, having an economy that's recovering and moving along, and making sure that it doesn't go too fast, or making sure that we do create opportunity for everyone to get back into those jobs. And that's what I heard the Federal Reserve talking about yesterday.
Heather, I'm curious what conversation is like among the members of the council right now on the role that enhanced unemployment benefits are or are not playing within this labor market recovery, particularly as we come into the summer, which on a seasonal basis tends to be a very strong hiring period, for a lot of businesses that are really only open for the next 3 or 4 months.
Well, that's a great question. And we spend a lot of time talking about that issue over here at the Council of Economic Advisors. A lot of paper, a lot of analysis, a lot of charts. And here's what we know. There's been a lot of research on unemployment benefits, over the years. And one of the things that we know is that those benefits are an incredibly important support for families, for workers, and it gives workers the time to find that right match. You go back into the labor force, finding a job that is, commensurate with their skills and their expertise. So it gives them the time to, do their job search. It's a really important benefit for unemployed workers. During the pandemic, when so many people literally could not search for that job because those jobs weren't available, having those additional benefits was just so important. And it's a key reason why the economy is recovering the way it is now. We did not see that fall off in demand that we would have expected had we not had those additional benefits. And we didn't give people time, to be able to cope with that unemployment. So there's a lot of positive economic indicators we see from those additional benefits. Now, as the economy gets back up and running, we need to make sure that the unemployment insurance system does what it's designed to do, which is supports people during periods of unemployment so they can find that new job and find that right fit. And so far, we have not seen strong evidence that this is having a significant effect, pulling people out of the labor force. People know that it's temporary, but also people out there searching for work. So that's what we're seeing in the economic data.
Heather, when you talk about the right match as well, I think the right match has changed for a lot of people, at least anecdotally, right? And seeing it somewhat in the data and hearing it somewhat from job sites, for example. In other words, the pandemic made people rethink what they wanted to do professionally for whatever reason, whether it was income, whether it was hours, or whatever it was. What role, if any, does policy have to play in getting those people then into the right jobs and in filling jobs that maybe not as many people want to do anymore?
Well, I think one question we have to ask is, why would somebody not want to do a job? I mean, one of the things that we learned over 2020 is that, we had, pots and pans out there for our essential workers, but we also saw that many of those workers were not protected on the job. They weren't paid enough. A lot of essential workers, those bus drivers, those retail store clerks, grocery store clerks, food delivery folks, these folks were in those jobs, making sure that our economy still functioned and oftentimes putting their actual lives on the line and the lives of their family members who might have been more vulnerable than they were to the COVID. I think a lot of folks saw that we weren't really honoring that work and providing those workers with the kind of dignity that they needed and deserved. And this feeds into the longstanding conversation about what the minimum wage should be. The president has made very clear that he thinks a $15 minimum wage is the way to go, because that honors those workers and that work, especially when we've seen how important so many of those low wage workers are across our economy. I think the other issue we've seen is in terms of the protections and the safety that people feel at work. Alongside some of these conversations, we've also seen a lot of news stories about violence erupting in America's workplaces as people argue over safety precautions and masks and, what's happening on, in workplaces. We heard a number of stories on airplanes across the country. That's somebody's workplace. So I think understanding that we need to make sure that workers are safe, that they are protected, and that they're paid a decent wage. This is an important piece of the puzzle as workers are going out there and saying, hey, what kind of industry do I want to be a part of? What kind of job do I want to strive for? I mean, people are seeing, the places where they're valued and the places where perhaps they need to be valued more.
Yeah, very interesting point. Heather, thanks. It's good to see you again. Thanks for spending some time with us this morning. Heather Boushey, member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors.
As we've been watching kind of this back and forth in Washington, D.C., as we've had Republicans sign on to the idea that we could meet in the middle there, that $1 trillion proposal, which kind of sheds out some of the more progressive pushes there when it comes to climate change, specifically a lot which was included in President Biden's original stance. Of course, the proposal would take Democrats buying into the idea of compromise. And for more on that, I want to bring on a Democratic senator from New Mexico. Senator Martin Heinrich joins us right now for more on that push. And Senator, you kind of put it bluntly in your tweet about this compromise and meeting in the middle, saying that you shouldn't count on every Democratic vote to want to agree to this compromise because it doesn't go far enough on climate. We heard Senator Ed Markey, your comrade from Massachusetts there, putting it even simpler, no climate, no deal. So what do you want to see, and what's the workaround here maybe for Democrats if this proposal is where the bulk of the party wants to go?
Well, I think the question is the deal an infrastructure bill as outlined by this group, plus additional climate measures through reconciliation, or is this the only game in town? And we are at a moment where we really have to be making major investments in solving the climate crisis. We are out of time. We need to show leadership on the world stage in the run-up to Glasgow to be taken seriously. And we need to begin that transition now. So if those investments are simply left out, I think that's a hard sell.
So, Senator, let's walk through some of those provisions that were in the original proposal from the president. You had the 500,000 charging stations, an update to the country's electric grid. You had additional money to help fossil fuel workers transition into the green economy.
Exactly.
I mean, there is a long list here, and I wonder which one of those you're willing to part with right now to get a little closer to a deal with Republicans.
So it's not my position that we need everything in the American Jobs Plan to get to yes. But if the package as a whole simply doesn't make the kind of scale of change that we're going to need to be able to address this crisis, then I think it simply doesn't meet the moment. There's no clean energy standard in this package. The investments in electric vehicles, we're hearing that it may actually make owning electric vehicles even more expensive instead of moving it in the right direction. So, I do believe we have to look at this in its totality, but we have to meet the moment. This is our time to do something about climate. The president certainly sold that on the campaign trail and incorporated those priorities into the American Jobs Plan. And I don't think it would be acceptable to most of the people who really embraced that agenda to simply walk away from climate.
You hinted at another alternative here, Senator, which is to sort of meet the Republicans on the infrastructure bill, but then have a completely different bill on some of these clean climate goals that could be passed through reconciliation. Has that ball already started? Have you already started the discussions on that front? And if you do move in that direction, do you have enough support on the Democratic side?
Well, I think that the likely path here is either these things will move in parallel, knowing that we have the votes to pass both, or we may not see either of them move past the Senate floor. So those are ongoing negotiations. And at the end of the day, my biggest concern is at a time when the West is on fire, when we have no water in our reservoirs, when people are really suffering directly from the kind of climate change aridification, not drought, but like long-term aridification, this is the time when we should be meeting that challenge, meeting that crisis, and not turning away from it.
Yeah, let me flip Akiko's question on the other side here too. I mean, if you were to point to some of those things that could potentially be left out, if this compromise is the way that it goes, what is one of those things that you say we just can't do without when it comes to the climate push here? Because there are a lot of things that would seemingly be left out if that's what we're going to see here.
Well, I think we've learned how to do these changes and manage transitions well, and we also know how to do them poorly. And really making sure that we take care of the people who have worked in our traditional energy industries is incredibly important. A clean energy standard would be incredibly important to move the dial on actual emissions. And if we're going to transition to an electric future, we have to have charging stations. So I think making it more expensive to own a new, Ford F-150 Lightning is a bad idea. So we have some work to do here.
Senator, we saw a lot of lawmakers responding to comments that climate advisor Gina McCarthy gave to Politico, talking almost as if the concession had already begun, saying that we will be able to push forward in these climate goals in a different way, because increasingly it does feel like they won't all be included in the infrastructure bill. And I wonder what that conversation has been like with the White House in trying to push forward these grand ambitions that they really highlighted in the first few months of this administration.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word grand ambition. This is necessary. This is us meeting a crisis that is impacting our economy, that is impacting our culture and our country. Fortunately, I think the White House walked back those statements really quickly, knowing full well how important a clean energy standard is to getting where we need to go. And I simply, feel that this is the moment when we have to meet these challenges, because failure is simply not an option.
Yeah, and just to go back to the reconciliation path there, I mean, it does seem like it's one of those things where you might lose the enthusiasm that you need, mainly among moderate Democrats there. And I'm thinking about Joe Manchin when we think about how he might operate in the idea of not wanting to go with the reconciliation pathway. Again, we've heard him kind of push back against that strategy here. How important would it be then maybe potentially to lose support among those Democrats specifically if that's the way this all shakes out?
Well, you need everyone's vote. So just as Joe Manchin needs my vote for passing an infrastructure plan, we're going to need his vote for reconciliation. And there needs to be a willingness on both sides to come to a resolution here. And I think we're really going to need leadership from the White House, from the president in particular, to be able to hammer out what that path looks like. But once again, I'll say that, ignoring climate change at this moment in time, that's simply not an option.
Senator, you just alluded earlier to this heat wave that's engulfing the West. Obviously, in New Mexico, looking at record temperatures. But we've also got these numbers coming out of places like Phoenix, a record 115 degrees, Palm Springs over in California at 120 degrees. And we're still in the month of June. As you look to your home state right now and how you cope with the record heat at a time when you're already experiencing drought, what are some of the solutions you're looking at? What are you hearing?
We're, investment in infrastructure is a big part of those solutions, and in particular, managing our water resources better. And that is something that I believe ought to be included in this infrastructure conversation, as well as, beginning the process of really ramping up the complete decarbonization of the economy. We've historically tended to just think about the electric sector. And if we're going to meet these challenges in a time frame that gives our kids a chance at the kind of lives that we've had, then we need to address decarbonizing the transportation sector of the economy, decarbonizing heavy industry, decarbonizing agriculture. And these sort of 1990s half measures just don't get us there.
On the issue of electrification, you've introduced this resolution to try and provide incentives to switch over from natural gas, especially in home appliances, machines. I mean, this is something that has become quite a contentious issue. And I wonder what kind of incentives you're looking at. What will it take for consumers and as well as builders to switch over? And how much of that is the federal government's role versus local governments, especially the state?
Well, I think creating those incentives that just simply remove the friction so that you can make a long-term economic decision instead of a short-term economic decision. And what I mean by that is if you're going to switch out a hot water heater from a electric or from a gas-fired hot water heater to an electric heat pump water heater, there's an upfront cost associated with that, but then there's a much lower month by month energy cost. And so if you can create the financing structures to make sure that people are acting in their long-term economic interest, then you can really incentivize a much quicker adoption of many of these technologies which also save lives, because we're learning a lot about indoor air quality, the risks associated with gas stoves and with combusting gas in enclosed spaces. And so I think we do have a role in making sure that people can act in their own long-term economic interest instead of feeling like, well, the hot water heater went out yesterday, so I have to take whatever is available and get it in right away.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues at hand here, and one that we've been watching as these back and forths continue. We'll see how it all shakes out, but thank you for taking the time here to chat with Senator Martin Heinrich from the state of New Mexico. Thanks again. We got another company going public via a SPAC merger, this time a company you might know well. That would be DNA sequencing company 23andMe making its debut today, and shares hitting a session high, now up 10% in that debut after finalizing the deal to go public via a SPAC merger with Richard Branson's SPAC, Virgin Acquisition Corp. And for more on the plans for the company to ride this wave we're seeing right now, I want to bring on the CEO of 23andMe, Wojcicki, joins us right now alongside Yahoo Finance's Brian Sozzi. And Anne, congrats on the debut. We don't get to celebrate a lot of these things, but always fun to have the CEOs on for their big day. Talk to me about what it's like to now come through this deal and what you're seeing shape up for your guys' quarters to come here.
Listen, it's super exciting. I've always run this company, not necessarily expecting that we were going to be a public company, and it certainly was never the goal. The goal has always been really about what's the impact to the customer, the end person, and how do you really make personalized medicine and personalized healthcare a reality. So it's a phenomenal day. I love actually being able to, be a public company because we do have a strong consumer brand, and it's really about engaging our customers more and more. So being a public company just gives us a platform to engage even more and to have a bigger impact.
And you come from the world of Wall Street. How will that experience help you in your public company journey?
Well, it's fun. Like, for one, it was great during the last few months of re-engaging with investors and a lot of old friends that I've known. I think, the most important thing for me now as CEO here is focusing on the long run and the long-term vision. So I really think about the next 5 to 10 years and what is that ultimate goal for the company, and how do you really have that kind of impact to really transform an industry, which is healthcare and drug discovery. So I'm very cognizant that Wall Street definitely has a shorter time frame. And I think part of what I'm excited about is, again, re-engaging. I love speaking with my investor friends and re-engaging and understanding that there's short-term questions, and I'm absolutely focused on the long-term vision.
Where do you think the company is in 10 years?
Well, if I think on 2003, Francis Collins came out and talked about how genetics was going to transform how we, predict, prevent, and treat all human disease. And in some ways, that's exactly what we're executing on. We're putting genetics in the hands of people so that they can really understand their human genome, and they can engage in research. They can follow along as we're figuring out what the genome means and what it means for them. So people are absolutely benefiting today from information about their own genome. And long-term, I'm really excited about the idea of a, essentially crowdsourced platform fueling drug discovery. And how great will it be one day to come back here and say that my customers who have engaged and opted into research have now cured some number of diseases.
And that's something that you've talked a lot about, being able to use the data that 23andMe has to be able to accelerate some of the R&D. You had a study that just came out on COVID-19 as well. When you look ahead to some of your partner companies, what's in the pipeline for you that you think 23andMe can really help accelerate in terms of development as well as research?
What's interesting that we do that I think a lot of people don't understand is we do research really at scale. Like, we're not a specific disease company. We're not just psoriasis or cancer or Parkinson's. We look broadly across the human genome, and then we follow the data. So we look at all of the, over 11 million customers, over 80% of them have opted into research, billions of data points in the database. So we use all of that to make discoveries. We have over 200 publications that have come out. We're all about contributing back to the research world, but we follow some of those discoveries to see, can you actually turn that into a therapeutic program? So that's where, again, the power of our customers being able to really have an impact on basic science discovery as well as the whole drug discovery world.
Yeah, let's talk about the shift in what 23andMe is too, because that's also interesting, kind of shifting from a DNA sequencing company, as people may have known it, to figure out, all right, who am I related to now kind of the health aspect and really leaning into that. You guys showed a slowdown of growth in terms of revenue in the last fiscal year relative to the year before that. I mean, how hard is it maybe to shift the image of 23andMe from one of what it was before to kind of the health side now? And what are you expecting to see, and maybe converting prior customers to really lean into that to drive growth?
Well, what was interesting, when we started the company, it was always about a holistic view of ancestry and health. And if you even think about our name, it was not just a health company. It's not an ancestry company. We're very different in that way. So we absolutely leaned into the ancestry opportunity when everyone was sort of thinking about, what is my identity? where am I from in the world? How am I connected to other people? And it was a huge opportunity to actually get people involved and just give them a taste of what does your genetics mean. A lot of people, if you just sit there in a mall one day and just listen, the number of times you'll hear people talk about DNA or their ancestry is fascinating, but yet people don't really understand exactly what that's going to mean in their health. And so that's what we are defining for people. What truly is a personalized healthcare experience for them? So people understand ancestry, and we rushed to definitely, when people were interested in it, like really put in the marketing dollars to have people join 23andMe. And then we did slow down, specifically with this idea saying we're going to pivot. We're going to spend the time really helping people understand what do you do with your health information, and how do we actually really, educate the world about what that experience is going to be.
To that end, and you do have a partnership, I believe, with GlaxoSmithKline, struck it, I think, in 2018 to develop drugs based on data that you do in fact get. When would that first product be coming out?
Well, we have our first program already in humans. So that's something that GSK is leading. CD96 is it's a phenomenal, it's an immuno-oncology program that is in humans now, and they will continue to update as data comes out on that. We have over 40 programs, underway in research, and we have our own program that we'll be updating you on soon.
When it comes to the subscribers you're talking about too on the health side, what kind of growth have you seen there? It looked like as of January, you had a little over 83,000 subscribers to that. I mean, what is the expectation there as you build that side out, maybe for the rest of the year?
Yeah, what we expected when we originally launched our subscription product, we launched it in part because we had surveyed our customers to ask them about really what do they want next from 23andMe. And over 70% of them were saying, over 75% said that they were actually trying to change their lifestyle and do more. And we realized our customers wanted more from 23andMe. So the first thing that we're doing with our subscription product that now has over 125,000 subscribers, that was the last update we gave. So the first thing we're doing is we're giving additional content. So, some of our polygenic risk score reports on heart disease, on pharmacogenetics, all of that now is part of the subscription product. So in the future, we absolutely think more and more about how do we, really help people understand the information that they have and then use that in their life for true personalized healthcare. And is that part of a physician consult? Is that part of, additional blood testing, pharmacogenetics, actually getting really the right medication? So all of those types of things are areas that we're exploring right now.
Exciting times, and exciting to be now a publicly traded company there as you see shares in the green. And Wojcicki, always love chatting with you. The 23andMe CEO alongside Yahoo Finance's Brian Sozzi. Congrats again on the debut.
You know our next guest best for his iconic TV role as Mr. Big on the HBO hit Sex and the City and on the long-running series Law and Order and The Good Wife. What you may not know is that actor Chris Noth is also an entrepreneur. That's right. He is co-owner of the New York City music venue, The Cutting Room, and he joins us now with his partner at the club, Steve Walter. Hey guys, good to see you both. Thanks for being with us. Chris, I want to start with you. When you first heard that you were able to reopen The Cutting Room for the first time during the pandemic, what was that like for you, and what does it mean for live music in the city?
Oh, well, it was a big relief. And, live music in the city is, even before the pandemic, has taken a big hit, I think due to financials and the price of running a venue in Manhattan. So it already had taken a big hit. So the fact that we were able to survive the pandemic, also we were blessed to have the person who owns the building have patience, and he happens to be a music fan. So we were lucky. A lot of places weren't so lucky.
Steve, I want to come to you for this, and Chris is kind of touching on some of the changes that really happened in live music, even prior to the pandemic. And I think so many people, especially since the pandemic hit, has said how so many things are just never going to be the same, how so many industries are permanently changed. Curious to know how you see live music being changed after the pandemic, or do you think it's going to go right back to how it was back in March 2020 and January and February 2020 and before the pandemic ever hit?
Will also be some good changes. Gives us little guys a chance because they can't play the Garden and all that, the big audiences, because the tours weren't set. So we can get some large acts that wouldn't play room this small. So some good things from it. It's always been hard for artists to live in Manhattan now because it's so expensive. So there's no artist community like there used to be. So that's one change. But also all these big bands are going out at one time. They're going to tripping over each other at the airport. So people don't have $1,000 to see all these major bands this summer. They're all going out because they're dying to get out there again. So it's going to be one big change. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But we're getting so many calls from bands and events and things. It's been great. And I'm so happy to be back because I really miss the staff. They're like family. So it's been a thrill to be back here again.
But just to add to what Steve was saying, I think it's a question mark because when you think of all the venues that have disappeared, the Bottom Line, CBGB's, to name just two of the most famous. And there are a lot of smaller ones that somehow the city kind of got encrusted by big corporate money, but it didn't translate to my mind, to the smaller arts and venues as much as it should have. And I would hope, I've always hoped that when there's an empty space that the city wouldn't give the tax break so that when a small business comes in, and they are willing to rent at a reasonable price, they'd give it to them instead of waiting for a bank or a drugstore to take it, who have all the money in the world.
I'm curious how you guys are dealing with getting people back into the venue. I mean, we heard today that the Springsteen show on Broadway is not allowing people in who have been given the AstraZeneca vaccine, so there are all these different rules. It's confusing for a lot of folks. If you're vaxxed, if you're unvaxxed, do you need an antigen test for COVID-19? Steve, I'll throw this one your way. What are you asking of people when they come to the venue?
Well, the restrictions were lifted yesterday, so it's back to normal, unless you're a massive venue, but everything's back to normal now. Thank God yesterday. He lifted it.
Yeah, I mean, we go with what the CDC says. Right. And if they're going to open it, we're going to trust that if someone knows they're infected, they're not going to be out in the public, and that most people in New York have been vaccinated. And, things do happen. People do get sick and get the flu too. But right now, with the vaccinations the way they are, we are sort of trusting that the CDC is reliable.
Right. If you're not vaccinated, wear a mask.
Yeah, that's what we hope to ensure.
I want to switch gears here just for a minute and talk about the film and TV industry, which we know was hit especially hard during the pandemic. Chris, you're going to be reprising your role as Mr. Big in the Sex and the City sequel series, Just Like That. We are looking forward to it. When does filming start, and how do you feel about getting back to it and being back with the gang?
I feel great. I said in another interview, I was at first hesitant. It was a little bit of a sort of creative negotiation because I didn't really feel I had anything to offer in that role again. It kind of felt like I had done it. But Michael Patrick King is just an incredible writer and has incredible creative ideas. And once we got together and talked about the potential of what we could do with the character, I was all in. I'm just happy. I was riding my Metro bike down here. And I saw film trucks on the Avenue, on 3rd Avenue, and I was like, yeah, it's great. Getting back, it just feels like we're back, the city's back, and film has started. I mean, we filmed The Equalizer toward the end of the pandemic, and we had very strict rules, and it worked. It worked out. Mask wearing and testing every day. So there was massive protection before we could work, and in terms of being tested before and after, and if you were flying in, you had to be tested, and so it really probably cost the studios and networks a lot of money to do that, and I think that now things are getting back to normal, and I look forward to it.
So Steve, obviously Chris highlighting just as an artist what it's like to really get back to work, get back to doing what, a lot of folks love. I'm curious to know what you're hearing from artists, the musicians, about your reopening, if they've just been sitting and resting on their laurels, if they're looking forward, excited to come back to a smaller venue. And in terms of hiring, how is that going? We hear so many companies saying they are struggling to find workers, even though they might have had to lay several off throughout the pandemic. How is that process going for you?
we've been really lucky. Almost everybody's back. I'm thrilled to say. Can use a few more in the kitchen, but generally everybody's back. So I'm very fortunate there. Musicians are dying to play. They're all calling. It's incredible how quickly the calendar is filling up. So yeah, everything's back to normal. You know, it's just great. And there's been some big bands, which I can't talk about right now, that are coming to play here, which I'm really excited about. And we're also getting a lot of filming. We've just had a couple last week, you know, for TV shows and things, and bands live on our stage. So we
do a lot of benefits here. I raise money for Rainforest Action Network, and I want to do a benefit for Greenpeace. And it's just a great venue. And we've had Sean Colvin came in and sang, and God, the original one was with Norah Jones. But you know, there's such creative wealth that it needs a place like the Cutting Room to find. For these people to find a place to be and to express themselves, because even though I feel that New York got sort of crushed by money in a weird kind of way in terms of little venues like ours being available to people, because there's great music out there. They just need a place to come to be able to play their music. And that was our original philosophy, because we love music. We grew up in the 70s and 80s and late 60s, and that's how our love for music was formed. It was everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of the soundtrack of our lives, right? I mean, I've been to the Cutting Room. It's an awesome lounge. I actually had my high school reunion there a few years back, and that was a blast. But before we let you guys go, Chris, I know that Broadway, you've done your share of theater as well, and Broadway's coming back mid-September. We're doing a Broadway special here at Yahoo Finance. What do you think it means, not just for the Broadway community, but for New York City, the fact that Broadway is going to come back?
Oh, well, it's huge. Although if you go to Times Square, you'll see that it's packed with people looking at neon. But Broadway is the backbone of tourism in New York, is the way I feel about it. And it's sort of how the Big Apple identifies itself in many ways. So I can't state how important that is, and I'm sure most New Yorkers will agree. We really are waiting with bated breath to get back in the theater and find a way to see the shows again. And it's been very, very hard on people in the unions, and the costume, and the set directors, and actors, and musicians. It's been very, very difficult for them. You know, and we do a little theater here, by the way, also. Yeah. It's
a lot of Monday nights when the theater's dark. They have side projects. We do a lot of Broadway stuff. We had Ben Vereen tonight.
Plus, I have to mention that the Cutting Room, I have a tequila called Ambar, and we are now, our official tequila at the Cutting Room is Ambar, for those of you who like tequila.
Naturally, right? You are quite the entrepreneur, Chris. So listen, guys.
Steve is the captain of this ship. You know, sometimes I may be the face because I'm better known, but without Steve, this place wouldn't be around. He really is the backbone of everything that this place represents. So I'm very grateful to him.
Thank you.
And please come, you guys. We want to see you over here.
Yeah.
Alexis and I are going to have a date together.
I'm so psyched. I'm very psyched that you are. Kristin, you and I are going to go. I don't think you've been to the club. We're going to go. It's called Cutting Room. Check it out, folks, if you're in the city. Chris Noth, Steve Walter, good luck to you guys. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
See you over tequila.
Welcome back. Research shows that employees dissatisfied with their work technology are more than twice as likely to leave their job in the next year. To help address that issue, Salesforce has partnered with Thrive Global's Ariana Huffington to expand its Work.com platform to help people succeed in a hybrid workforce. We are delighted to have with us Ariana Huffington herself, founder and CEO of Thrive Global, and Patrick Stokes, who is Executive Vice President and GM of Platform at Salesforce. Thanks to you both for being here. Patrick, I'm actually going to start with you. I'm hoping you can set the stage for us about why you felt the need to expand Work.com and some of the challenges that hybrid workers are facing right now.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having us on, Alexis and Kristin. Pleasure to be here. You know, we're in a really incredible period of time. I'd say over the last year and a half, the way that we work has fundamentally changed. But perhaps more importantly, the relationship that we have with our work has fundamentally changed. The relationship we have with where we work and how we get to work and the applications that we use to do our work or to do our job. And this last year and a half has really forced employees to reevaluate that relationship. And as the economy has really started to get back and people are starting to kind of go back to work, I think business leaders have an opportunity now as well, and perhaps even a mandate to reevaluate those things as well and to redefine their employees' work. And we know this because people want more freedom. They're feeling burnt out. They want a more frictionless experience with where they work and the tools that they use. And so we have an opportunity to provide some incredible tools that are more consumer-like tools like Facebook and Google that employees of today have really grown up using. And so we're really excited about that opportunity. And we're thrilled to be working with Ariana and Thrive Global. We're really learning so much from working together.
So Ariana, I want to come to you now because I think we talk about this quite a bit. What are some of the ways that employees need to be supported right now, especially as they are experiencing those levels of burnout? What initiatives really need to happen? What policies need to be implemented to make sure that workers aren't feeling stressed and burned out and struggling with mental health?
Well, the first thing, as Patrick said, is to acknowledge this connection between health and well-being on the one hand and performance and business metrics on the other. These two things, because of the pandemic, have now been seen and are being seen by management everywhere, are completely integrated. So what we're doing with Salesforce, as an example, is meeting workers wherever they are. They are on work.com in any interface, their mobile, their iPad, their work laptop, wherever they are, we come to them. Depending on the assessment they feel, we know what area they are struggling with. Is it sleep? Is it food? Is it movement? Is it stress? And we feed them targeted micro steps, as we call them, small incremental steps that will help them adopt healthier behaviors and achieve better results, and content, storytelling that will help inspire and empower them. And then we continue that relationship. So they don't have to download a dedicated app. They can just get that content, those micro steps, exactly where they are. And I think workers more and more really want that. You know, the idea of office perks, being ping pong tables and endless snacks is no longer enough. What workers we see from all the surveys expect and want is support in living a healthier and more productive life, and cultural permission from the top that this is the future and increasingly the present.
You know, Patrick, we're sort of seeing this phenomenon right now as more cities open up. People are going back to some normalcy. They're going out dining again. They're going to some entertainment venues and sports venues, but there is that hesitancy to go back to the office. I think a number of things are at play there, but can you maybe tick off maybe some of the reasons why we're seeing that?
Well, I think people want to feel safe, right? They want to know when they get back to the office that that they can get there safely, that their organization has done everything that they can to make sure that those employees are going back safely. But I also think there's an element of people have been working differently. And they want to know that when they get back to the office that they have a little bit more flexibility that they've had in the past, that they can do their best work and really kind of exist and be as creative as possible. And so I think people want to feel safe, but they also, you know, they want to bring some of the flexibility that they've had, that they've been able to kind of experience over the last year and a half. And they want to know that their employer is thinking about how to provide that flexibility for them as well.
If employers don't give that type of flexibility and that support, Ariana, do you think that they're going to continue to struggle, as we have been seeing lately, to bring more workers back into the workforce? Because we're hearing now a lot of workers are saying, listen, I can stay at home, I'm getting unemployment, and I don't need to be as stressed out as I was when I was in the workforce, not getting paid well, not having good benefits, being stressed out and burned out all the time. I'd rather stay at home and be on unemployment. I mean, until employers really start to address some of these issues, do you think the labor market can really get back on its feet?
Well, at the heart of this whole big debate is the issue of burnout, as you identified it. Burnout has become a global epidemic that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. But at the same time, we have an opportunity, actually a once-in-a-generation opportunity, to redefine productivity and work. Because just think of it, even pre-pandemic, we're working breathlessly, frenetically. Diseases like diabetes and hypertension were skyrocketing. So was the mental health crisis. So there is a tremendous idea and pressure at the moment to use this pandemic as a catalyst for fundamental change and not to go back. So some of what you said, the reluctance to go back is not just the reluctance to go back to a physical space. It's the reluctance to go back to a way of working and living that was not working even pre-pandemic. And I think it's a healthy reluctance because it gives us an opportunity to redefine how we go back.
Last night there was the New York City mayoral debate for the Democratic candidates. And one of the questions asked of the candidates was, how much sleep do you get a night? And Ariane, I know you and I have talked in the past about the importance of sleep. And some of these candidates were almost wearing it like a badge of honor, saying, I get 3 hours a night, I get 4 hours a night. What would your message to them be?
Actually, I just tweeted this because the truth is that we now have so much science and so much data that sleep deprivation is linked to bad decisions, to lower productivity. So leaders need to stop bragging that they'll sleep when they're dead and recognize that actually the city that never sleeps, New York, needs a mayor who does, because that's the best way to get a mayor who makes great decisions. And increasingly, as we talk about the importance of empathetic leadership, well, empathy is the first thing that's depleted when we are running on empty.
And Patrick, I want to come to you here just to kind of circle back to what we were chatting about here about creating work products that really help workers and employees in this more hybrid workspace. I think we focused a lot on the employee and how it's necessary to care for their, emotional and mental well-being. I'm curious to know the flip side of this, right? Because I think we've heard of a couple of CEOs come out and really lambast this work from home movement. But I'm curious to know from your position, really, how is this new hybrid workplace making things easier for the worker coming to where they are, improving the tech that they essentially interface with in this hybrid world that we're now going to be in? How is this actually a positive or a boost for companies as they move forward out of the pandemic?
Yeah, well, we think it's a huge positive. We think employees that have more flexibility, that are able to work in environments that are really comfortable for them, where that's where they can do their best work, right? That's where the creativity comes out. And we know that employees that are feeling really happy, that are feeling really productive, they're going to do their best work. And when they do their best work, this is the thing that a lot of CIOs are starting to come around to, is when their employees are doing their best work, that reflects on the business, that reflects directly to their customers and ultimately to their revenue growth. And so it's really important. We've all been on a customer service line, right, where we've heard a really unhappy customer service rep on the other side of that. That's usually because they're overworked or burnt out or don't have all the right tools or don't have all the right connections. And so when we can improve that, when we can make that a really amazing experience for that end employee, it's going to have a direct impact on customer satisfaction as well.
Absolutely. I think this is really the key, to recognize that the two are interconnected. If you have stressed out employees dealing with anxiety, depression, they're not going to be productive. And what we see, and that's why we break it down into micro steps, that even 60 seconds of a pause between Zoom meetings, of some deep breaths, of a stretch, of remembering what you are grateful for, just very simple, basic micro steps can make a big difference to returning to work in a more productive way. We even use these micro steps at call centers, as Patrick mentioned, where stressed out operators are delivering an inferior customer experience. But if you give them these moments of breaks, the data shows unequivocally that we can reduce the cortisol stress hormone in the body and move out of fight or flight and be much more effective and much more empathetic.
Oh, Ariana Huffington, always great to see you. Patrick Stokes of Salesforce, thank you both for stopping by today. We appreciate it.